Welcome to another video on the red coat. This time I want to tackle the lining of the body. Off camera I've already mocked up the pockets. I've got them roughly how I want them. If you saw the floral biker jacket that I completed recently, I'm using a similar approach for the interior pockets on this one too. There are going to be some exterior pockets, but we'll cover that in a later video. I'm not covering the lower half of the coat in this video. That's something where I need to do some planning with the fabric that I've actually got. I found some matching velvet finally, but as is the nature of velvet, you can only use it in one direction, and I've got to make sure that I have enough to do what I want with the outer before I can build the inner. We'll come to that in a future video in this little series. For now, we're focusing on how quickly this lining actually goes together, putting the sleeves in and putting the pockets in. Hopefully this all goes very smoothly. You'll have to excuse any background noise you can hear. I have got an air conditioning running because of the heat at the moment, and there's not a lot I can do about that. Sorry about that. This is the back of the bodice, and I've already sewn up this sleeve seam here. That's just a straight stitch seam all the way down. There are one-piece pattern for these sleeves, and I wanted to do that to check the fit on me so I knew how to locate this sleeve. So I know that's roughly the top of the sleeve cap, and that's roughly the top of my shoulder. And when I tried this on, that means this seam here for the sleeve actually lines up with this seam here. I thought it went round a bit further. Apparently not. That's really good because that gives me a point of reference, so I can sew from this point under the arm and round to the front, and then the ease for the sleeve cap will start probably around about here and go round to about here, because these sleeves actually sit back a little bit, and you can see this is the fabric that we'll be taking in. Before I set the sleeves in, I'm actually going to sew the body up. Again, very simple. We just have a shoulder seam up here, princess type seam here, same on the other side, and that's it. The body on these goes together really fast, which is nice. Well, today the weather has beaten me. It's got too hot. I've barely got anything done. But if you run into this problem, don't worry, progress is progress. What we've achieved is the sleeve seam on both is done. Now, because this is a slightly curved seam, you do want to clip it, as we've done here, and press it open. The shoulder seams are a nice straight seam, so you can just press that flat. That's nice and easy. And on the back, these princess type seams, again, very curved, so they do need clipping, so you can press them nice and flat. The only thing that annoys me on this is that the diamond pattern here, because I'm limited on how much fabric I've got, isn't perfectly central. It doesn't really matter because it's a lining, but I do wish I'd had just a little bit more fabric to correct that. But never mind. Sewing is rarely perfect. A few moments for you and a few days for me. The hot weather that cut the first part of this video short, yeah, it was a bit intense, but it's done with now, and autumn is definitely on the way, which is fantastic. Sensible temperatures, no more sun trying to bake me alive. Very happy about that. That has allowed me to get some more progress done, although I am a little bit last minute here. This is video upload day, and I'm doing the video. That's not normally how I do things. I have got one of the interior pockets put together, and I've got one of the sleeves put on. Now that I know how smoothly this goes and what my pitfalls are, let's crack on and show you how to do the other side. We'll start with one of the sleeves. The pin that's in here is a little marker for me so I know where the top of it is. So that's where it sits on top of your shoulder. It's just a reference point for when I line it up. I did learn that the seam on the sleeve does actually line up with the, well, for want of a better description, the princess seam on the back of the coat. So that's pretty handy. That gives me two good reference points to work from. You want to set your machine, if you're doing this on the machine rather than by hand, to the longest stitch that it does, because we're going to put some ease into the sleeve cap. And you want to go from the edge of the fabric all the way around the curved bell section of the outer sleeve. This is a very floopy fabric, so you see where it curves up like that. You want to go all the way around there. And you will need 2 rows of this stitching. Now if you've used a marker pin, do be careful as you come up to it. Obviously you don't want to sew over it. You can see here that the stitches are already actually putting the ease in for us. This fabric is very slippery and not particularly compliant or pleasant to work with as a result. So that can be a bit of an issue, but on this particular step it's working in our favour, because this is what the gathering stitch is to do. Now you want to put a second row in. This helps stabilise your gathering and it helps to stop the gathering from coming undone when you actually move it. I'll explain better when we actually do that. You want to run the second row further down the sleeve toward the cuff, just a bit further in than that first row that you did. And that will give you 1 row of stitching up here and then another one just a little bit further down. And like I say, this has already put the ease in, so this will make the next stage slightly easier, which is nice. Now that we've got the stitching in here, and you can see it slightly better here I think than you could before, I've pinned the sleeve around the underarm and I've pinned all the way to each end of where the gathering is. My marker pins at the top tell me where the top of the sleeve is. That will help me balance the gathering that's in this section. And what we need to do is we need to get this fabric here to squash down into this fabric here, because at the moment there's just a little bit too much. The back isn't as bad, there's not as much to take in. And the way that you do it is ignore the bottom one for now, because you might not need it. That's just more to help hold wherever you do the top one. And you pull the thread and shuffle the fabric along a little bit, and you're not really looking to get very visible pleats or gathers here. You're looking to just sort of squash the fabric in a little bit. This is definitely one of those sewing jobs where watching somebody do it and actually doing it yourself is quite different. So it might not make a lot of sense on camera to you, but if you take some scraps and have a play about with this sort of thing, you'll very quickly get a feel for it. So as you can see here, the amount of fabric on both sides lines up, and we've got just sort of a gathered look, but it's not where we're going to be sewing. And now I've just gathered this one, and I've taken just a bit too much in because the non-gathered side is just a little bit too large. So all you do there is you just very gently ease everything back out to the open end of the seam that you've got there. I'll sew all the way around as normal, and then we will pull out the gathering stitches that we've put in here, and that will be the sleeve cap done. That's all sewn on now, and it went moderately well. There are a couple of little tucks in here that I'm not keen on. This side didn't sew quite as nicely as the other side. As you can see over here, this one went a lot better. But as I said, this fabric is not very good for doing this sort of work. It's not keen on squashing down. It doesn't have much of that sort of ability. The important thing is when you look at the inside of it, it is a nice smooth seam in there, and that's what you're aiming for really. So as long as the visible side of everything looks good, you're okay. This side, which will be hidden inside the coat, doesn't matter so much. Next, let's tackle the interior pockets. I'm doing patch pockets on this rather than welt pockets just because they're easier. The next challenge is going to be the pockets. Now I've got the lining on the mannequin here inside out. Actually it looks quite smart this way around, I think. And there are two inside pockets to put on this, just because I like to have inside pockets. Very, very simple construction. If you've watched the Floral Biker Jacket series, you'll have seen me do these on there. You will need one long rectangle for the pocket. Now, I'm doing it this way because I don't trust how strong this fabric is long term, so I like to double it up so that I have a good strong pocket. And you will also need a little bit of edging. I'm using some velvet from the bottom of the curtain. Velvet is notoriously difficult to press, and because this is from the bottom of the curtain, it already has a fold in it, so that saves me some time. Do make sure when you use your velvet that you match the direction of the pile on it, because otherwise you will end up with a different colour. Just with how velvet works. And of course the other thing you need to figure out is whereabouts the pocket is going to sit so that you can actually use it. To do that, I put the lining on as a finished garment and then moved the pocket around on me until I got it about where I wanted it to be. They always look like they sit very, very low, but that's because when you use an inside pocket, you don't want it up here. You actually want it down here, so it's just a bit easier to get things in and out. Also prevents you getting bulk up on the top of the garment, which doesn't look very good. If you've got things in your pockets and they're around the middle, it's a little bit easier to hide normally. Not that there'll be anything bulky in here, it'll only be things like a phone or a wallet or a pen, that sort of thing. This one's already finished, so I will take you through the process of turning this one into that one. These are the pattern pieces that you'll need. A small piece for binding the top of the pocket. This is just to help with wear and tear on that top edge of the pocket and prevent it from bagging out. And the pocket bag itself. To work out how big you want this to be, figure out what you want to put in it first. So we're folding it in half because we're doubling the thickness of the fabric, and the thing I want to put in is my phone. You have to leave enough space so that the pocket can bulge out a little bit to accommodate the third dimension of the item rather than just the surface area, and a little bit for your seam allowance. I rough guess this, and sometimes I get it wrong. I don't know the maths behind it, I just do what looks about right. So that looks about right. First thing you want to do is take the long strip of fabric, which is your pocket bag, fold it in half so the reverse of the fabric is showing on the outside. So down this side and this side only. Press it and turn it the right way out. Now that you've sewn it, pressed it, turned it the right way out, we're ready for the next stage, which is to put the velvet bias trim on top. And I'll just double check with the other pocket. Right, so I know that's the outside face and that's the inside face, and you can see just how different that colour is, even though it's the same fabric, and that's just to do with the direction of the pile. So before I figure out where I'm going to sew that, I want to see which side of this I prefer to, because sometimes you find, not really the case with this one fortunately, that you have a slightly nicer looking seam on one side or the other, so it's always worth checking that. For the trim, you want to roughly centre it over the pocket bag, like so. And just pin it in place. And then run a line of stitching along here, but don't go all the way up to this fold, because what we'll do next is that will fold in that far. So you need to leave this free, and about where these pins are about where you would sew, like a normal seam allowance. It's fabric origami time. This is one of those bits where it can seem a bit frustratingly complicated, but it's actually really not. We have the fold line on the velvet there, and we have the sewing line here. And the first thing to do is fold in the sides, because we need to hide these raw edges. And you fold them in as far as the width of the pocket bag itself. Then flip it over that way and fold up this pocket bag using your seam that you've sewn there as your guide, and that should fold up to the fold line on the velvet itself. I'm just going to pop a pin in there to hold that in place. In fact, let's make it a bit easier. Put one through the end bits that we've done. Like so. I'll take those two out. Then you want to fold this down, keeping the corners that you'd folded there in place, and then that folds over again like so. So you're sort of rolling it over. So you fold like that, and then you fold like that, and then this edge here should line up with that little seam line there that you put in. This is definitely a lot easier to do when I'm not trying to do it in front of the camera for you, so I am making it look a lot harder than it really is. Okay, sorry I had to take that off camera there. I had to do that on my knee because I couldn't see what I was doing. Anyway, you should end up with something that looks rather like that, and the end you'll see is sort of rolled around and round. You can, if you want to, just run a seams along here with the machine. My machine will definitely go through this thickness. I know it's capable of it. But I prefer to hand sew, and the way I do that I'm not going to do that on camera. I did try, it didn't work. So the way I do that is I start from here, and you just use a whip stitch or a blanket stitch, whichever you prefer, and just catch all of these edges all the way along this edge here and then back up here. One thing that helps as a guide is you have the seam that you made with the machine to put these two pieces together, so that lets you know that this edge here is in the right place when you sew it. I shall do this off camera and I will show you the end result when I've finished. One finished pocket ready to go on the coat. You can't see the machine stitching on this side, which is the side that will be showing, and on the back you can hardly see the hand stitching, which is nice. Velvet is very forgiving with that sort of thing. The sides we've bound with just a few rough stitches in there, and that's perfectly fine for what we're doing. And now we just need to sew this onto the lining in the same position as the other pocket. That's the pocket sewn on and completed. And that really does mark the completion of the upper body lining on this jacket now. The sewing machine wasn't the biggest fan of all these thicknesses of velvet here, but it did do it. These old machines are fantastic that way. I did sew very close to the edge, and the reason for this is it means I go through the maximum amount of layers of this fabric, and it makes the pocket as big as possible. Because the stitches are all the way around and quite small, that should be a very strong pocket. I shouldn't have any problems with that in the future. Everything's very loosely pinned at the moment, so this one does look slightly higher than the other side. I wouldn't worry too much about that if I were you. One thing of note as well is, because of the shape of these sleeves, sometimes I've noticed they sit back like that, and then if you give them a wiggle, I think it's because the curve in them, they actually curve out towards you and sit in, but the actual sleeves fit perfectly fine. There's no issues there. It just looks a bit strange. Obviously the back looks lovely too. That's all done. And this is the inside, so you will not really see it like this again once everything's put together. That's it. That's the end of the video. Thank you for stopping by this week, and especially if you're one of our new viewers. I've seen that we've picked up a few new people lately. Craft videos one week, car videos the next week normally. Sometimes there's a little bit of a muddle up with the scheduling. It depends what I've got going on. As there has been last couple of weeks, it's all been a bit of a jumble just lately in the real world, which is why this video is like it is. Please do check the description box below. There's more information down there for bits and bobs and stuff. Also, you can just subscribe to the channel. That really helps. A like, a comment, anything like that's really, really good. Trying to get the channel to get to a wider audience, get more people in, and hopefully help people out with their projects, whatever they happen to be, whether it's cars or sewing or woodwork or whatever. I'm a jack of all trades and very definitely a master of none. Right, I will see you when I see you, and take care wherever you are out there. Bye for now.